The saloon doors swung open on that dusty summer day in 1875, silencing every conversation in the broken spoke as Violet Dawson stepped inside. Her cotton dress, once a cheerful blue, now stretched tight across her growing belly. She'd come to claim what was rightfully hers, even if the entire town of Silver Creek, Wyoming territory, thought her a fool. "I'm looking for the owner of the Double S Ranch," she announced, her voice steady despite the weight of 24 judgmental stares. "I carry his child." The silence broke into a chorus of derisive laughter. Men slapped their knees, whiskey sloshed from glasses, and the saloon girls exchanged knowing looks. Only the tall figure at the bar remained motionless, his broad shoulders tense beneath his worn leather vest. "Honey, you best run along," the barkeep chuckled. "Every girl with a bun in the oven claims it belongs to someone with money. The Double S belongs to Patrick Weston now, and he ain't the type to fall for such tales." The man at the bar turned, revealing a weather-beaten face with sharp blue eyes that had seen too much of the harsh frontier. He studied Violet's determined stance, the proud tilt of her chin despite the humiliation coloring her cheeks. "That'll do, Hank," he said, his voice cutting through the mockery like a knife. He walked toward Violet, spurs jingling with each deliberate step until he stood before her. The laughter faded as he removed his hat, revealing sun-bleached hair. "They seem to find your situation amusing, madam," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "But I don't." His eyes held hers, searching for something only he could see. Then, to the astonishment of everyone present, he placed his hat over his heart and said, "If you're carrying a child that needs a father, then I'll be the father." A stunned silence fell over the saloon. Violet had practiced what she'd say 100 times on the long journey from Boston, but nothing had prepared her for this unexpected turn. This wasn't how she'd planned it at all. "Mr. Weston, let's discuss this someplace more private," he interrupted, offering his arm. "These folks have had their entertainment for the day." As Patrick guided her out of the saloon, Violet knew her life had just changed in ways she couldn't possibly imagine. The whispers followed them into the street, but Patrick Weston didn't seem to hear them. His eyes remained fixed on the dusty road ahead, leading toward an uncertain future they would somehow face together. The main street of Silver Creek baked under the afternoon sun as Patrick led Violet toward a small office attached to the general store. People stopped to stare, and Violet kept her eyes forward, refusing to show how deeply the town's judgment cut her. "In here," Patrick said, opening a door marked Silver Creek Land Office. The room was sparse but neat, with a desk, 2 chairs, and a cabinet filled with papers. He closed the door behind them, shutting out the curious onlookers. "Please sit." He gestured to the chair across from the desk, then poured water from a pitcher into a glass and handed it to her. "You look like you've had a long journey." Violet accepted the water gratefully. "Thank you, Mr. Weston." "Patrick," he corrected, settling into the chair behind the desk. "Now, I suspect you have a story to tell me." She studied him more carefully now. He wasn't what she'd expected. The man before her was perhaps 30, with lines at the corners of his eyes that spoke of long days under the sun. His hands were calloused from work, not the soft hands of a man who'd inherited wealth. "I'm Violet Dawson," she began. "6 months ago in Boston, I met a man named Thomas Sinclair. He said he owned the Double S Ranch in Wyoming territory. She faltered, looking down at her hands. "I understand," Patrick said quietly. "When I told him about the child, he promised to send for me once he returned west and arranged things. Weeks passed, then months. Eventually, I received a letter saying he was ill and to come quickly if I wanted my child to have a name." Her voice trembled slightly. "I spent nearly everything I had to get here, only to discover upon my arrival that Thomas Sinclair died 3 weeks ago." Patrick's expression remained unreadable. "And the townspeople told you I had taken over his ranch?" "Yes, they said you were his business partner." Violet straightened her shoulders. "Mr. Weston, Patrick, I don't expect charity. I'm a skilled bookkeeper." I managed my father's accounts for years before his passing. I can work, earn my keep. All I ask is a chance to provide for my child, a child who has a legitimate claim to the Sinclair estate." Patrick was silent for a long moment, then leaned forward. "Miss Dawson, there's something you should know. Thomas Sinclair was many things, but he was never the owner of the Double S." Confusion crossed her face. "I don't understand. The Double S has been my ranch for the past 5 years. Thomas worked for me as a foreman until I sent him east to arrange cattle sales. He had no ownership stake, he was." Patrick paused, choosing his words carefully, prone to exaggeration when it suited him. The color drained from Violet's face. "Then everything he told me was a lie." "Not everything, perhaps, but his claims of wealth and property?" "Yes, those were false." Violet's hands trembled as she set the glass down. All her plans, her hopes for her child's future, crumbled before her eyes. "I see, I've made a terrible mistake coming here. I should go." "Wait." Patrick's voice stopped her as she rose. "My offer stands." She looked at him in disbelief. "Your offer? You can't possibly mean what you said in the saloon." "I rarely say things I don't mean, Miss Dawson." He stood and walked to the window, looking out at the town. "Thomas worked for me for 3 years. He wasn't a bad man, just weak in certain ways. And regardless of his failings, that child you're carrying is innocent. Why would you do this? You don't know me." Patrick turned to face her. "I know what it's like to grow up without a father. And I know this territory well enough to understand what life holds for an unmarried mother and her child." He crossed his arms. "I'm offering marriage, Miss Dawson, protection for you and your child, a name, a home. A marriage of convenience," she said flatly. "For now, yes." His gaze was direct, honest. "I won't lie to you. I need someone to help run the ranch house, keep the accounts in order. You need security and respectability. In time, perhaps we might find more common ground." Violet felt dizzy with the rapid turn of events. "This is madness. You don't marry a woman simply because she needs help. Out here, people marry for practical reasons all the time, survival first, sentiment later." He stepped closer. "I'm not offering romance, Miss Dawson. I'm offering partnership. Think carefully before you refuse." Violet looked down at her swollen belly, thinking of the child growing within. What future awaited them if she left? She had no money left for a return journey, no family waiting in Boston. Her options had narrowed to this single, unexpected opportunity. "If I agree, there would need to be conditions," she said finally. A hint of a smile touched Patrick's lips. "Name them." "I would expect to be treated with respect, to have some say in decisions affecting my child, and I would need meaningful work, not just household chores." "Agreed on all counts," he nodded. "And I have conditions as well. You must give this arrangement a fair chance. 1 year minimum. You'll take my name and present us as a proper married couple to the community, and you'll be honest with me always." Violet took a deep breath. "When would this take place?" "Tomorrow morning. The circuit preacher's in town until noon." Patrick's expression softened slightly. "Unless you need more time to consider." "No," Violet said, surprising herself with her certainty. "Time won't change the facts of my situation. Tomorrow is fine." Patrick extended his hand, and after a moment's hesitation, Violet took it. His palm was warm and rough against hers, the handshake sealing their unusual agreement. "I'll arrange for a room at the boarding house tonight," he said. "Tomorrow, after the ceremony, we'll ride out to the Double S. It's about 2 hours from town." As Violet left the land office, she wondered what kind of man so readily took responsibility for another man's mistakes. Patrick Weston was either the most honorable man she'd ever encountered or had motives she couldn't yet discern. Either way, she had just tied her fate to his, and only time would reveal whether she'd made the wisest or most foolish decision of her life. The next morning dawned clear and cool, a brief respite from the summer heat. Violet dressed in her best gown, a green dress that had once fit perfectly but now strained at the seams. She'd spent a restless night at the Silver Creek boarding house, alternating between doubt and desperate hope that she was doing the right thing. Mrs. Holloway, the owner of the boarding house, had been surprisingly kind after hearing of the impending wedding. She'd helped Violet press her dress and even provided a small bouquet of wildflowers from her garden. "Patrick Weston is a good man," the older woman had told her. "Keeps to himself mostly, but fair in his dealings. You could do worse, especially in your condition." The ceremony took place in the small white church on the edge of town. Only a handful of people attended. The preacher, Mrs. Holloway, Patrick's ranch foreman Henry Gunderson, and the land office clerk who served as a witness. Patrick wore a clean black suit that fit his broad shoulders perfectly, his usually untamed hair slicked back with water. The preacher, a gray-haired man named Reverend Miller, kept the service brief. As Violet repeated her vows, she noticed Patrick's steady gaze never left her face, as if he were memorizing her features. When he slid a simple gold band onto her finger, where had he found a ring on such short notice? His touch was gentle. "You may kiss the bride," Reverend Miller announced. Patrick hesitated, then leaned forward and placed a chaste kiss on her cheek. The gesture was respectful, nothing more, but Violet felt an unexpected warmth spread through her. "Mrs. Weston," he said quietly, offering his arm. Outside the church, a wagon waited instead of horses. "I thought this would be more comfortable for you," Patrick explained, helping her up to the seat. As they left Silver Creek behind, Violet found herself studying her new husband's profile. In the clear morning light, she could see the faint white scar that ran along his jawline, and the way his eyes constantly scanned the horizon, a habit of a man accustomed to watching for trouble. "How did you acquire the double S?" she asked, breaking the silence that had settled between them. Patrick adjusted the reins before answering. "Won it in a card game. You're joking." "No, madam." A hint of amusement touched his lips. "The previous owner, old Samuel Stone, that's where the double S comes from, was a gambling man with poor judgment. I was passing through with cattle money in my pocket. By morning I owned a ranch and he was headed for California." "That seems unusually fortunate," Patrick glanced at her. "Not exactly. The place was nearly worthless when I got it. Fences broken, cattle scattered, house falling apart. Took 2 years of back-breaking work to make it profitable. And now it's one of the better operations in the county, not the biggest but respectable. We run about 800 head of cattle, keep 20 horses. I've got 4 full-time hands, plus seasonal help during roundup and branding." The terrain changed as they traveled, the flat plains giving way to rolling hills covered in sagebrush and scrub oak. In the distance, blue mountains rose against the sky. "It's beautiful," Violet said softly. It can also be brutal. Winters are harsh, summers dry. It takes grit to make a life here." He looked at her directly. "Do you have that kind of grit, Mrs. Weston?" The question wasn't unkind, merely practical. "I suppose we'll both find out," she answered. They crested a hill and Patrick pulled the wagon to a stop. Below them stretched a verdant valley, a creek winding through it like a silver ribbon. Nestled in a grove of cottonwood trees sat a substantial 2-story house, a barn, and several outbuildings. Cattle dotted the hillsides, and a corral near the barn held several horses. "The double S," Patrick said, a note of pride in his voice. Violet was surprised by the size of the operation. She'd expected something more primitive, but the ranch house was well built, with a wide front porch and glass windows that caught the sunlight. "It's impressive," she admitted. "It's home," he replied simply, then clicked to the horses to continue down the hill. As they approached, a dog began barking, alerting the household to their arrival. A woman emerged from the house, shading her eyes against the sun. She was perhaps 50, with gray streaked dark hair pulled into a severe bun. "That's Mrs. Abernathy," Patrick explained. "She's been housekeeper here since I acquired the place. Fair warning, she's particular about her domain." The wagon rolled to a stop before the house, and Patrick helped Violet down, his hand strong at her waist. "Mrs. Abernathy approached, her sharp eyes taking in Violet's condition without comment. "Mrs. Abernathy, I'd like you to meet my wife Violet," Patrick said. We were married this morning in town. If the housekeeper was surprised, she hid it well. Madam, she said with a nod, welcome to the Double S. I've prepared the main bedroom for you both. Thank you, Violet replied, suddenly aware of what the evening would bring. She and Patrick would be expected to share a room, a bed. The thought made her pulse quicken with anxiety. Patrick seemed to sense her discomfort. Mrs. Abernathy, perhaps you could show Mrs. Weston around the house while I see to the horses. Of course. The older woman gestured for Violet to follow her inside. The house was surprisingly comfortable, with solid furniture and clean, bright rooms. The main floor held a large kitchen with a cast iron stove, a dining room that could seat 10, a study filled with books, and a comfortable sitting room. Upstairs were 4 bedrooms, including the master bedroom with its large 4-poster bed. Mr. Weston had this furniture shipped from Denver last year, Mrs. Abernathy explained as Violet ran her hand over the polished mahogany dresser. Said a proper house should have proper furnishings. It seems he's done well for himself, Violet observed. Through hard work and determination, yes. The housekeeper gave Violet a measuring look. This isn't an easy life, Mrs. Weston. The winters are long, diversions few. Men who succeed here do so through grit and sweat. And women? Violet asked. A hint of approval crossed Mrs. Abernathy's face. Women survive through strength and adaptability. The question is, do you have those qualities? Before Violet could answer, footsteps sounded on the stairs and Patrick appeared in the doorway, carrying her small trunk. I trust Mrs. Abernathy has made you feel welcome, he asked. She's been very informative, Violet replied, meeting the housekeeper's gaze with a small smile. Dinner will be ready at 6, Mrs. Abernathy announced, then left the room, closing the door behind her. Alone with her new husband for the first time since their hasty wedding, Violet felt a flutter of nervous tension. Patrick set her trunk at the foot of the bed, then moved to the window, giving her space. I had a room prepared for the baby next door, he said, nodding toward an adjoining door. Mrs. Abernathy found a cradle in the attic. It needs some work, but I can fix it up before the child arrives. The thoughtfulness of the gesture caught Violet by surprise. Thank you, that's very considerate. Patrick turned to face her. I want to be clear about something, Violet. This is your home now. You're free to make whatever changes you feel necessary to be comfortable here. And us, she asked quietly, what are your expectations for tonight? His expression remained gentle but serious. I meant what I said about this being a partnership. I won't demand anything you're not ready to give, he gestured to the bed. This is yours. I'll take one of the other rooms until you decide otherwise. Relief washed over her. That's very understanding. It's practical. He moved toward the door. Rest now. Dinner's in a few hours, and tomorrow I'll show you the rest of the ranch. After he left, Violet sat on the edge of the bed, overwhelmed by the day's events. 24 hours ago, she'd arrived in Silver Creek desperate and alone. Now she was Mrs. Patrick Weston, mistress of the Double S Ranch. She placed a hand on her swollen belly, feeling the child move within. We'll be all right, she whispered, hoping it wasn't a lie. We have a home now and a name. The rest we'll figure out as we go along. Over the following weeks, Violet settled into life at the Double S. Each day brought new challenges and discoveries. She learned the rhythms of ranch life, the early mornings and the constant work that kept the operation running. Patrick was often out from sunrise to sunset, overseeing the cattle, fixing fences, or handling business in town. Despite her condition, Violet insisted on making herself useful. She took over the household accounts, organizing Patrick's haphazard record-keeping system into something efficient. To her surprise, the ranch was more prosperous than she'd initially thought, with steady profits that Patrick had been reinvesting in land and livestock. Her relationship with Mrs. Abernathy evolved from wary respect to something approaching friendship. The older woman was a fountain of practical knowledge about everything from preserving food to treating common ailments. When she learned of Violet's skill with numbers, she seemed genuinely impressed. Most women who come out here can't read beyond their Bible verses, Mrs. Abernathy commented one afternoon as they prepared vegetables from the kitchen garden. Mr. Weston chose well, even if the circumstances were unusual. Violet looked up from the ledger where she'd been recording expenses. Did he tell you about the child not being his? He didn't need to. I've eyes in my head. Mrs. Abernathy's knife never paused in its rhythmic chopping. But it makes no difference to me. A child needs a father and you needed a husband. Mr. Weston needed someone to bring order to this house. Seems like a fair arrangement to me. Violet's interactions with Patrick remained cordial but distant. True to his word, he slept in another bedroom, though he checked on her welfare daily. They shared meals and occasionally evenings in the sitting room, where he sometimes read aloud from one of his books while she sewed baby clothes from fabric Mrs. Abernathy had found. On a warm August evening about a month after their wedding, Violet sat on the front porch watching the sunset paint the western sky in brilliant orange and red. The baby had been particularly active that day, making it difficult to find a comfortable position. She heard Patrick's footsteps before she saw him, the distinctive sound of his boots on the wooden porch boards. He appeared around the corner, dusty from a day's work, his shirt clinging to him with sweat. "Evening," he said, removing his hat. "Mind if I join you?" Violet gestured to the empty chair beside her. "Please do." Patrick sank into the chair with a grateful sigh, stretching his long legs out before him. "Roundup starts next week," he said. "I'll be gone overnight for a few days. Henry and the boys will be nearby if you need anything." "We'll be fine," she assured him, unconsciously placing a hand on her belly. "Mrs. Abernathy hardly lets me lift a finger these days." A comfortable silence fell between them as they watched the colors deepen in the sky. In these quiet moments, Violet found herself increasingly aware of Patrick as a man, his strength, his quiet competence, the respectful way he treated everyone around him. "You've changed things here," he said suddenly. "For the better." Violet glanced at him, surprised by the comment. "Have I?" "The house feels more like a home now. The accounts are in order. Even the hands have noticed the improvement in meals." He turned to look at her, his blue eyes catching the last light of day. "You belong here, Violet. I want you to know that." Something in his voice made her heart beat faster. "Thank you for saying so. I wasn't sure at first, but I'm beginning to feel that way too." Patrick hesitated, then reached across the space between them, his hand covering hers where it rested on the arm of the chair. The touch was gentle, questioning. "I know our arrangement began as one of convenience," he said quietly, "but I find myself growing fond of you." Violet felt warmth spread through her that had nothing to do with the summer evening. "I've grown fond of you as well, Patrick." His thumb traced small circles on the back of her hand, sending unexpected shivers up her arm. "I'd like to court you properly if you're willing, starting after the baby comes." The suggestion took her by surprise. "Court me? But we're already married." A smile touched his lips, softening the weathered lines of his face. "In name only thus far, I'd like to earn the right to be your husband in truth. No rushing, no pressure. Just a chance to see if what I'm feeling might be mutual." Before Violet could respond, a sharp pain gripped her abdomen, causing her to gasp and double over. Patrick was on his feet instantly, kneeling before her. "Violet, what is it?" She gripped his arms, her knuckles white as another wave of pain washed over her. "The baby," she managed. "I think it's coming, but it's too early. I'm not due for another month." Patrick didn't hesitate. He scooped her into his arms as if she weighed nothing and carried her inside, calling for Mrs. Abernathy. The housekeeper appeared from the kitchen, taking in the situation with one glance. "Get her upstairs," she ordered. "Then ride for Dr. Wilson in town." "There's no time," Violet gasped as another contraction seized her. "It's happening too fast." Mrs. Abernathy's expression was grim but determined. "Then we'll manage ourselves." It wouldn't be the first child born without a doctor present. The next hours passed in a blur of pain and fear for Violet. Patrick refused to leave, despite Mrs. Abernathy's insistence that childbirth was women's business. He stayed by Violet's side, holding her hand, wiping her brow with a cool cloth, murmuring encouragement when the pain became almost unbearable. "You're the strongest woman I've ever known," he told her during a brief respite between contractions. "You can do this." In the darkest hour of the night, with a final push and a cry of pain that seemed to tear from her very soul, Violet brought her child into the world. Mrs. Abernathy worked quickly, cutting the cord and wrapping the tiny infant in a clean blanket. "A girl," she announced, placing the squalling bundle in Violet's arms. "Small but strong." Tears streamed down Violet's face as she looked at her daughter for the first time, a perfect, miniature human with a cap of dark hair and tiny fists that waved in protest at being thrust into the cold, bright world. "She's beautiful," Patrick whispered, his voice thick with emotion. He reached out a tentative finger, which the baby immediately grasped with surprising strength. "Would you like to hold her?" Violet asked. Patrick hesitated, then carefully took the infant into his large, calloused hands, cradling her as if she were made of the finest porcelain. The tenderness in his expression as he looked down at the child who was not his by blood, but was now his by choice, stirred something profound in Violet's heart. "What will you call her?" he asked, gently rocking the now quiet baby. Violet had considered many names during her pregnancy, but in that moment only one seemed right. "Hope," she said. "Her name is Hope." "Hope Weston," Patrick repeated, a smile breaking across his face. "It's perfect." As dawn broke over the double S, Patrick sat beside Violet's bed, Hope sleeping peacefully in a cradle nearby. Mrs. Abernathy had finally retired after ensuring both mother and child were stable. "You should rest too," Violet told him, though she was grateful for his presence. Patrick shook his head. "I'll stay a while longer." She studied his face, noting the dark circles under his eyes and the stubble on his jaw. Despite his exhaustion, there was a contentment in his expression she hadn't seen before. "Thank you," she said softly, "for everything. Not just tonight, but for all of it, taking us in, giving us a home, a name." Patrick's gaze met hers, and the emotion there took her breath away. "You've given me something too, Violet, something I didn't know I was missing until you arrived." He reached for her hand, entwining their fingers. "A family." In that quiet moment, with her daughter sleeping peacefully and Patrick's warm hand in hers, Violet realized that what had begun as an arrangement of necessity was transforming into something neither of them had expected, something that felt remarkably like love. The weeks following Hope's birth brought changes to the double S. Patrick postponed the cattle roundup, sending Henry and the hands without him so he could remain close to the ranch. He spent his days working nearby, returning frequently to check on Violet and Hope, bringing wildflowers he found on the range or small wooden toys he'd carved during evening hours. Hope thrived despite her early arrival, growing stronger each day. Her dark hair and blue eyes showed no resemblance to Patrick, but he doted on her as if she were his own flesh and blood. Violet often found him in the nursery, holding the baby and telling her stories about ranch life, describing the horses and cattle as if the infant could understand every word. As autumn approached, bringing cooler days and golden light, Violet recovered her strength. She resumed her work with the ranch accounts and began accompanying Patrick on short rides around the property, eager to learn more about the operation. Hope would remain at the house with Mrs. Abernathy, who had appointed herself the child's fiercest protector. One crisp September morning, Patrick suggested a ride to the northern boundary of the ranch, where a small lake nestled against the foothills. They set out after breakfast, Hope securely in Mrs. Abernathy's care, and rode at an easy pace through meadows where the grass was beginning to turn from green to gold. "I never expected to enjoy riding," Violet admitted as they followed a game trail through a stand of aspen trees, their leaves shimmering yellow against the blue sky. "In Boston, ladies only rode side saddle and only in parks," Patrick chuckled, Hard to round up cattle from a side saddle. Are you suggesting I should help with the roundup? She teased. I wouldn't put it past you. His smile was warm, appreciative. You've taken to ranch life better than anyone expected. They reached the lake just before noon. It was a perfect mirror of the sky, reflecting the surrounding hills and trees with such clarity it seemed like another world existed below the surface. Patrick helped Violet dismount, his hands lingering at her waist a moment longer than necessary. It's breathtaking, she said, gazing across the water. I come here to think sometimes. Patrick retrieved a bundle from his saddlebag and spread a blanket on the grassy bank. From another bag, he produced bread, cheese, and apples, a simple but welcome meal. As they ate, Violet found herself studying Patrick's profile. Over the past months, she'd come to appreciate not just his kindness and integrity, but the quiet strength that defined him. He was a man who did what needed doing without complaint or expectation of praise. You're staring, he observed, a hint of amusement in his voice. Violet didn't look away. I was thinking about how little I knew you when I agreed to marry you. It was a tremendous risk for both of us. Do you regret it? The question was casual, but she detected an undercurrent of vulnerability. Not for a moment, she answered honestly. Relief flickered across his features. Nor do I. They fell silent, listening to the gentle lap of water against the shore and the rustle of leaves in the breeze. It was Patrick who finally spoke again. Do you remember what I said the night Hope was born, about courting you properly? Violet's heart quickened. I remember. Patrick turned to face her fully. The past weeks, watching you with Hope, seeing your strength and grace, I find myself thinking of you as my wife in more than name only. He took her hand gently in his. I know the circumstances of our marriage were unusual. I know your heart may still be healing from Thomas's deception, but I want you to know that my feelings for you are real and growing stronger each day. Emotion tightened Violet's throat. Patrick, you don't need to say anything now, he assured her. I just wanted you to know where I stand. Whatever you feel, whatever you want from our marriage, I'll respect it. Violet looked down at their joined hands, his large and work roughened, hers smaller but no longer the soft hands of a Boston lady. Like the rest of her, they had adapted to this new life. When I came west, she said slowly, I was desperate and afraid. I believed my only option was to claim what Thomas had promised me. She met Patrick's gaze. I never expected to find a man like you, someone who would offer protection without demanding anything in return. Someone who would love a child not his own. Hope is easy to love, Patrick said softly. As is her father, Violet replied, the words coming naturally. Because that's what you are to her, Patrick, and to me, you've become far more than a convenient husband. The hope that dawned in his eyes gave her courage. Violet leaned forward, closing the space between them, and pressed her lips to his in a gentle kiss. Patrick remained perfectly still for a heartbeat, then responded with a tenderness that made her heart ache. His hand came up to cradle her face, thumb brushing her cheek as if she were something precious. When they parted, both slightly breathless, Patrick rested his forehead against hers. I've wanted to do that since the day you walked into that saloon, proud as a queen despite everyone laughing. Violet smiled, remembering. You were the only one who didn't laugh. I was too busy admiring your courage. He brushed a strand of hair from her face. I think I started falling in love with you right then. The word love hung in the air between them, both a declaration and a question. Violet answered by kissing him again, more confidently this time. Patrick's arms encircled her, drawing her closer, and she felt the last walls around her heart begin to crumble. When they returned to the ranch that afternoon, something had shifted between them. That night, for the first time, Patrick came to their bedroom not as a visitor, but as a husband. With gentle hands and whispered words, they discovered each other anew, forging a bond that transformed their marriage of convenience into one of deep and abiding love. As winter descended on the Double S, bringing snow that blanketed the range in pristine white, the Weston household settled into a contented rhythm. Patrick expanded the main house, adding a larger kitchen that delighted Mrs. Abernathy and a proper office where Violet could work on the ranch accounts without distraction. Hope grew stronger daily, her laughter filling the rooms that had once been silent and sparking joy in everyone around her. Word of the unusual circumstances of their marriage had spread throughout the county, but Patrick's standing in the community and the obvious happiness of the couple soon silenced most gossip. When they attended the Christmas service at the Silver Creek Church, Violet noticed with satisfaction that the same townspeople who had laughed at her that first day now greeted her with respect. On Christmas morning, after exchanging simple gifts by the fire, Patrick brought out a final package, small and wrapped in silver paper. "One more," he said, placing it in Violet's hands. Inside was a document, official looking with a red seal at the bottom. Violet read it, then looked up at Patrick with tears in her eyes. "Adoption papers?" Patrick nodded, glancing at Hope, who was contentedly playing on a blanket nearby. "I want to make it official in every way possible. Hope should never question who her father is." Violet threw her arms around him, overwhelmed by the gesture. She couldn't ask for a better one. Later that evening, with Hope asleep in her cradle and snow falling gently outside, Violet and Patrick sat before the fire, his arm around her shoulders as she leaned against his chest. "I have news," she said softly. "Oh," Patrick's voice was relaxed, content. Violet took his free hand and placed it on her stomach. "Hope will have a brother or sister by next summer." Patrick went still, then turned her face toward his, eyes searching hers. "Truly." The wonder in his expression made her laugh. "Truly. Dr. Wilson confirmed it yesterday when you were checking the north pasture." Joy spread across Patrick's face, followed by concern. "Are you feeling well? Do you need anything? I can ride into town tomorrow." For Violet silenced him with a kiss. "What I need is right here," she assured him. "You, Hope, our home. Everything else is just details." Patrick pulled her closer, his hand still resting protectively over the new life growing within her. "When you walked into that saloon 6 months ago, I had no idea you would change my life so completely." "They laughed when I said I was pregnant," Violet remembered, nestling against him. "And I said I'd be the father," Patrick finished, kissing the top of her head. "It was either the bravest or the most foolish thing you've ever done." Patrick chuckled, the sound rumbling pleasantly against her ear. "Turned out to be the wisest decision I ever made." Outside, the snow continued to fall, covering the double S in a blanket of white that glittered under the rising moon. Inside, beside the crackling fire, the family that had begun with an unexpected proposal in a dusty saloon embraced their future, secure in the knowledge that what had started as an arrangement of necessity had blossomed into the greatest blessing either of them could have imagined. The following spring brought new life to the double S. Fields that had lain dormant under winter's snow burst with wildflowers in vibrant purples and yellows. Calves wobbled on unsteady legs beside their mothers, and the sound of Hope's laughter as Patrick carried her around the ranch on his shoulders became a familiar melody. As Violet's pregnancy progressed, Patrick insisted on hiring additional help for the house. A young widow named Clara joined them, taking over the heavier household duties and helping with Hope, who had just celebrated her first birthday with a small gathering that included Henry and the ranch hands. "You spoil me," Violet protested one evening as Patrick insisted she rest while he and Clara prepared dinner. "I'm protecting my investments," he replied with a wink, pressing a kiss to her forehead before returning to the kitchen. The joke held truth under Violet's management. The ranch's profits had increased substantially. Her systematic approach to the accounts had uncovered opportunities for better contracts and more efficient operations. Patrick had implemented her suggestions without hesitation, respecting her business acumen as much as he valued her companionship. In late June, just as the summer heat began to intensify, Violet went into labor. Unlike Hope's early and frightening arrival, this birth progressed normally. Dr. Wilson arrived from town in plenty of time, and by sunset, Patrick was holding his son, a robust baby with his father's blue eyes and a shock of dark hair. Samuel, Violet suggested, remembering the original owner of the double S, Samuel Patrick Weston. Patrick's eyes shone with emotion as he nodded. Samuel it is. As summer turned to autumn, the Weston family settled into their expanded roles. Hope, now a curious toddler, regarded her baby brother with a mixture of fascination and occasional jealousy. Patrick proved as devoted a father to Samuel as he was to Hope, often carrying both children as he went about his work around the ranch house. On a golden afternoon in October, Violet sat on the front porch, Samuel sleeping in her arms while Hope played with wooden blocks at her feet. The sound of hoofbeats drew her attention to the road, where a buggy was approaching. Visitors were rare at the double S, especially unannounced ones. As the buggy drew closer, Violet could make out a well-dressed man and woman. Something about the man's posture seemed vaguely familiar, but she couldn't place it. Patrick emerged from the barn, wiping his hands on a cloth as he walked to meet the visitors. The buggy stopped and the couple descended. The man removed his hat, revealing dark hair streaked with gray at the temples. Even from the porch, Violet could see Patrick's stance change, his shoulders tensing as he recognized the visitor. With a sense of foreboding, Violet realized who had come calling. She stood, clutching Samuel tighter to her chest, and called for Clara to take the children inside. By the time she reached Patrick's side, the visitors were introducing themselves. "Mrs. Weston, I presume?" The man bowed slightly. "Thomas Sinclair, and this is my wife, Eleanor." Violet felt as if the ground had shifted beneath her feet. "Thomas, but you're dead." A smile that didn't reach his eyes crossed his face. "Greatly exaggerated, I'm afraid. I was indeed ill typhoid fever but recovered after a lengthy convalescence in Denver." The woman beside him, elegantly dressed in a traveling suit, regarded Violet with undisguised curiosity. "So this is the girl you wrote about, Thomas." Patrick moved closer to Violet, his body language protective. "What brings you to the double S, Sinclair?" "Last I heard, you'd headed east and never intended to return." "Business primarily," Thomas replied smoothly, "and some unfinished personal matters." His gaze shifted to Violet. "I understand congratulations are in order. I'm told you have a daughter." Violet lifted her chin. "Yes, Hope." "She's 15 months old now. May I see her?" Thomas asked. "No," Patrick said firmly. "You gave up any right to that child when you abandoned Violet." Thomas's expression hardened. "I didn't abandon anyone. I was deathly ill." "Yet somehow neglected to send word once you recovered," Patrick countered. "Even after learning Violet had come west." Eleanor Sinclair laid a restraining hand on her husband's arm. "Thomas, perhaps we should discuss this privately." Violet found her voice. "Mrs. Sinclair, how long have you and Thomas been married?" The woman's perfectly composed face revealed nothing. 3 years this December." The implications hit Violet like a physical blow. Thomas had been married when he met her in Boston, when he'd wooed her with tales of his ranch and promises of a future together. Patrick's jaw tightened dangerously. "I think you should state your business and be on your way, Sinclair. You're not welcome here." Thomas straightened his jacket. "Very well, I'll be direct. I've come to claim what's rightfully mine." "And what might that be?" Patrick's voice was deceptively calm. "My daughter," Thomas said. "I understand you've been raising her as your own, Weston, and that's commendable. But she carries my blood, and I intend to provide for her future." Violet stepped forward, fury replacing shock. "Hope is not yours to claim. You lied to me, deceived me, left me to fend for myself. Patrick has been her father in every way that matters since before she was born." "Sentiment doesn't change biology," Thomas argued. "I'm prepared to be generous financial support, educational opportunities back east. Eleanor and I can provide advantages that a cattle ranch in Wyoming territory simply cannot." Patrick's hand came to rest on Violet's shoulder, steady and reassuring. "Hope is my daughter legally as well as in my heart. I adopted her last Christmas with full documentation filed in Cheyenne. You have no claim to her, moral or legal." Thomas's confident expression faltered for the first time. "You can't simply—" "I can and did," Patrick interrupted. "While you were recovering in Denver without bothering to send word, I was holding Violet's hand through childbirth. While you were returning to your wife, I was walking the floor at night with a colicky infant. I've earned the right to call Hope my daughter, and no court in this territory would say otherwise." Eleanor tugged at her husband's sleeve. "Thomas, you didn't mention adoption papers." Thomas shook her off irritably. "A technicality that can be challenged." "On what grounds?" Violet demanded. "That you're a better choice, a man who misrepresented himself as unmarried and wealthy, who abandoned a pregnant woman without a second thought. No judge would favor your claim." The confrontation might have escalated further if not for the sound of a child's voice. Hope had escaped Clara's watchful eye and toddled outside, making her way unsteadily toward her parents. "Papa," she called, arms outstretched toward Patrick. Without hesitation, Patrick scooped her up, settling her on his hip with practiced ease. Hope immediately buried her face in his neck, suddenly shy in the presence of strangers. Thomas stared at the child, his child by blood, who showed no recognition of him whatsoever. For a brief moment, something like regret crossed his face before his expression hardened again. "This isn't over," he said, but the conviction had gone out of his voice. "Yes, it is," Eleanor said unexpectedly. All three turned to look at her in surprise. Her composed demeanor had cracked, revealing genuine distress underneath. "Thomas, look at them, they're a family." "Eleanor, no," she cut him off with a gesture. "I've supported your business ventures, overlooked your indiscretions. I even agreed to this journey because you convinced me it was about a child's welfare, but I can see plainly that this child is exactly where she belongs." She turned to Violet and Patrick. "I apologize for our intrusion. We won't trouble you further." Thomas looked as if he wanted to argue, but something in his wife's expression stopped him. With a curt nod, he turned back to the buggy, helping Eleanor in before climbing up beside her. "This isn't the last you'll hear from me," he called as he flicked the reins. Patrick watched them leave, Hope still in his arms. "Empty threats," he said quietly. "He knows he has no case." Violet wasn't so sure. "He's a determined man, Patrick, and he has resources we don't. So do we." Patrick shifted Hope to his other hip. "We have truth on our side. And a community that will stand with us if needed." That evening, after the children were asleep, Patrick and Violet sat in his study, discussing what Thomas might do next. The possibility of a legal battle loomed, though both agreed it would likely amount to nothing. "He wants to hurt us," Violet said, pacing near the window, "to reassert control somehow." Patrick watched her from behind his desk. "What troubles me is why now? Hope is over a year old. If he recovered from his illness months ago and learned you'd come west, why wait until now to make a claim?" Violet stopped pacing, struck by the question. "You're right, it doesn't make sense unless—" "Unless he needs something," Patrick finished. "Something beyond Hope herself." The next morning brought the answer in the form of Henry Gunderson, who rode in from town with news. "Sinclair's been asking questions all over Silver Creek," he reported. "About the ranch, about water rights, about your financial standing." Patrick's expression darkened. "So it's not about Hope at all, it's about the double S." "What do you mean?" Violet asked. "The new railroad spur," Patrick explained. "They've announced it will pass within 5 miles of our northern boundary, right near that lake I showed you last fall. Land values will double, maybe triple, once construction begins." Understanding dawned. "He's using Hope as leverage. Threatening a custody battle to pressure us into some kind of settlement. Most likely." Patrick's jaw tightened. He always was more interested in easy money than honest work. Violet's fear transformed into anger. "He's using our daughter as a pawn in a business scheme. That's despicable." "It's also predictable," Patrick said grimly. "And it gives us an advantage. Thomas doesn't truly want Hope, he wants the double S, or at least a piece of it." Over the next week, they prepared for whatever Thomas might try next. Patrick rode to Cheyenne to consult a lawyer, ensuring Hope's adoption was ironclad. Violet organized their financial records, documenting every improvement made to the ranch since Patrick acquired it. When Thomas finally made his move, it wasn't through legal channels but through the court of public opinion. An article appeared in the Silver Creek Gazette questioning Patrick's fitness as an adoptive father, and suggesting that the true father of Hope Weston had been wrongfully deprived of his rights. The attempt at character assassination backfired spectacularly. The people of Silver Creek, who had watched Patrick build the double S from near ruin to prosperity, who had seen how he'd stepped forward to marry Violet when she stood alone and pregnant in the saloon, rallied to the Weston's defense. Letters flooded the newspaper, testifying to Patrick's character and condemning the anonymous true father who had abandoned his responsibilities. Reverend Miller preached a sermon about the true meaning of fatherhood that left little doubt as to whom he believed deserved the title. By the time Thomas Sinclair called at the double S again, he found not only Patrick and Violet waiting for him, but also Reverend Miller, Sheriff Davies, and half a dozen of the most respected ranchers in the county. "This is private business," Thomas protested, glancing nervously at the assembled group. "Not anymore," Patrick replied calmly. "Not when you chose to make it public." Sheriff Davies stepped forward. "Mr. Sinclair, I understand you're claiming paternity of the Weston child. I also understand you were legally married to another woman at the time of the child's conception. Are you aware that adultery is still a crime in this territory?" Thomas paled. "I'm not here to discuss that." "I'm here about my rights to—" "You have no rights," Reverend Miller interrupted, his normally gentle voice firm. "What you have is obligations to the wife you betrayed and to the woman you deceived. If you had come seeking forgiveness, that would be a different matter." "I came seeking justice," Thomas insisted. "No," Violet said, stepping forward. "You came seeking profit. The timing makes that perfectly clear. You showed no interest in Hope until you learned about the railroad plans." Thomas's expression confirmed her words more clearly than any confession. The gathered witnesses murmured disapprovingly. Patrick moved to stand beside Violet, his voice level but carrying authority. "Here's what's going to happen, Sinclair. You're going to leave Silver Creek today. You're going to publish a retraction in the Gazette, acknowledging that Hope is legally and rightfully my daughter, and you're going to stay away from my family permanently." "And if I refuse," Sheriff Davies answered, "then we'll have a very public discussion about fraud, adultery, and attempted extortion. Your choice." Faced with unanimous opposition and the threat of legal consequences, Thomas Sinclair had no option but to retreat. The retraction appeared in the next edition of the Gazette, and within days, rumors circulated that the Sinclairs had left for San Francisco. As summer heat gave way to autumn coolness once more, the double S thrived. The railroad construction began as predicted, bringing increased value to the ranch lands, but also new markets for cattle. Patrick and Violet invested the profits wisely, adding acreage and improving the breeding stock. Hope grew into a spirited 3-year-old with her mother's determination and her father's kind heart. Samuel, now 2, followed his sister everywhere, while their baby brother James, born just after the confrontation with Thomas, completed the family that had begun with an act of extraordinary kindness in a dusty saloon. On the 5th anniversary of their wedding, Patrick took Violet back to the lake where they had first acknowledged their growing feelings for each other. The children remained at the ranch house with Clara and Mrs. Abernathy, giving the couple a rare day to themselves. As they spread a blanket beneath the same aspen trees, now larger and fuller than before, Patrick produced a small velvet box from his pocket. "What's this?" Violet asked, taking it curiously. Inside was a gold ring set with a perfect diamond, far more elaborate than the simple band he'd placed on her finger 5 years earlier. "I thought it was time you had a proper engagement ring," Patrick explained. "Our beginning wasn't conventional, but these past 5 years have been the happiest of my life." Tears welled in Violet's eyes as he took the ring and slid it onto her finger beside her wedding band. "It's beautiful, Patrick. Not half as beautiful as you." He took her hands in his. "When you walked into that saloon, proud and frightened but determined to secure a future for your child, I admired your courage. When they laughed at your announcement, I saw the pain behind your eyes and wanted to shield you from it." "You did more than shield me," Violet said softly. "You gave me a home, a name, a family." Patrick's smile was tender. "And you gave me purpose, love, children to raise, everything I never knew I wanted until you appeared." Violet leaned forward to kiss him, still marveling at how this man, once a stranger who had offered marriage out of compassion and duty, had become the center of her world, the love of her life. "They laughed when I said I was pregnant," she whispered against his lips. "And I said I'd be the father," he finished, drawing her close. As the sun dappled through golden aspen leaves, casting patterns of light and shadow across the blanket where they sat, Violet and Patrick Weston embraced the life they had built together, a life that had begun with an act of kindness and blossomed into a love story that would be told in Silver Creek for generations to come.